Now, if you saw my October update, you know that I just got this 210-gallon tank, and all December we will be gradually adding components to it until it's a finished project. And today I got the very first thing that I wanted to install. It just arrived in the mail. It was too big and heavy, so I went to pick it up. But that install is coming up right after this. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and of course throughout all of December I've got one big project, and that's getting this tank set up. You see, I bought Mr. Tubes knowing that I was getting this tank, and I was like, oh man, he's a cute little fish. He'll stay small for a long time and I'll have plenty of time to get this set up. But the fact is, he's growing day by day. And I really need to just get this thing finished. I spent a lot of time wondering how I was going to decorate this tank, and what can be a huge problem that you don't have in nano tanks is that everything is just like exponentially larger. So if I want to put a log in here or a rock in here, the scale has to be so much bigger than I would normally use that it gets kind of difficult to find materials. So I thought for this tank especially, since it's going to be such a huge presence in the home, I was going to pay a little bit extra and get a really, really nice 3D background. Now, one thing a 3D background does, aside from hiding all the mechanical accoutrement inside your aquarium, it sort of offers a baseline of an aquascape. So visually, as you look through there, it's decorated all the way up to the top. Now the bottom I plan to just cover in plants. I want to plant this out as much as I can, and I'm working on getting a log or something else that matches these things to go in there, but that'll be all in a future video. The company I used for this background is called Aquadecor. I had first heard of them on Joey's channel when Joey was unboxing all these backgrounds he had for his fish gallery. I thought all those backgrounds were really, really neat, and I decided to kind of go to the website and look them up. And by the way, I've got a link for their website down below. Now you can go to their website and browse around. They have lots of different features. They have some that are all rocks. They have a bunch that are logs. Really just a whole huge variety of backgrounds, and all of them are pretty gorgeous. Once you pick a background that you like, you can submit for a free quote, and they usually get to you within 24 or 48 hours, depending on when you write them, and they'll tell you exactly what it costs to put that in your tank. Now, when I first looked at the backgrounds, this was sort of on the back burner, the big tank, and I was looking for smaller tanks, and I think probably the minimum size, if you want a background from them, is going to be like maybe a 40-gallon, but probably like a 50, 75, 90-gallon tank. That's probably the size that you'd want to work with. So I went to the website, I picked out a background I want, I got a quote, decided I could live with that, and then I had to wait on my tank to arrive. The reason is you have to measure things precisely for this to fit, and it was even more complicated than that because I had these risers on either side here that work as the overflow for the aquarium. So once I had the tank in and I started to measure it, they sent me this form. And this form has like a rough outline of an aquarium, and it shows you where the little pillars are for your overflow. And it's got even another section here where you can make really precise measurements, and you send it to them. What they do is they make sort of a foam mock-up of the background of your aquarium, especially if it's got pillars. They'll just use foam or something to kind of represent, based on the measurements you send them, they'll make some foam mock-ups to represent the back of your tank. Then they custom make the background, and they make it so it'll wrap around. This particular background is sort of it's a real thin material. And where it rises up here, that's actually hollow underneath there. So it's a pretty pliable, I mean, it keeps its shape, but it's still kind of pliable. You can bend it and stuff. And it really just goes right to the background. It's really interesting to walk in the front door and see like this really, really beautiful display. They have some other backgrounds, I believe, that are more foam-based or they're thicker, and they would have to be siliconed on to really stay. But with this type of background, especially if you get one that's small enough that it can be mailed all in one piece, you can pretty much just set it into the back, and you don't really have to attach it to anything. Now, because this project was so huge, they did actually cut this into 3 pieces. And really, the most difficult part of this whole process was getting those things to join just right and make it look as natural as possible. There were some big gaps after I installed it and stuff, but I really couldn't avoid it. I got most of it the best you can, and you can only see it from like certain angles and stuff, but I've kind of got a plan for that. The other thing too is the rock's kind of craggly and has cracks and stuff all through it. So if you didn't personally try to make it fit to the right spot, you probably won't notice the small imperfections. Not to mention the fact that what you do see can be easily hid with moss or decorations or any number of things. Especially at the bottom. I mean, if this goes the way I'd like, there's going to be plants at about this level all the way through here. So, or in all the major areas. So your eye is going to have a lot of things to process, from the rocks to the wood to the plants and the foreground materials, and of course the fish. Now this came in 3 pieces, and because I didn't feel like I could just push it against the background and it really look its best, I decided to silicone it down. When I set the measurements in, I kind of thought they would probably drill some holes for the overflows and stuff, but they don't do that. They kind of leave that for you to decide. So one thing I did before I put anything into the tank was I drilled little holes all through it. And what I would do is I'd just take advantageous shadowy places like under the log and stuff like that. I did some less stealthy work over the top of the overflows. I just did a series of holes up there. It's because it's really important to make sure that the water's coming through. I also didn't silicone the bottom of this at all, so there is a little bit of a gap underneath. It'll be interesting to see what happens when there's pressure of the water on here, if that'll further kind of compress the background and make it maybe fill in a couple of the gaps. There's only like one big major gap on this last part over here that's a little annoying, but it's easily missed if you don't know what you're looking for. The other thing I need to do is drill some holes for the spray bars and stuff like that, but I'll probably do that as I install the filter next week. Now on most of the instructions and things you'll see from them, really the optimal thing is to take the tank and lay it down on its side and get the background just the way you want and then put it back. The trouble is this is 210 gallons and I have basically no friends. or at least none of them with a good enough back that I don't want to, maybe permanently injure just trying to put a background in my aquarium. So I came up with something else. I had a couple of 2x4s in the garage that are from old projects. They're like little partial cut pieces of 2x4. And what I did is I found some old sheets of leather. I had some leather scraps and stuff. So I just glue gunned some leather onto either end of a bunch of different size boards. And I used those to kind of wedge all throughout the aquarium to make to just provide pressure against the parts that I wanted. What's interesting is they have these little tiers on the back of this thing, these little stands, so that you can get it at just the right level so they'll kind of match going all the way across. And I thought that was really cool. They also have other places to kind of just indicate where you can silicone, so if you choose to silicone it down, you can. I thought I would probably need a lot of silicone. I really only ended up using 1 tube. It was kind of difficult to find the correct silicone. I did a lot of viewing, back to Joey's channel and looked at some stuff that he recommended. Because I was ready to kind of just get it done and didn't feel like the silicone I would get at PetSmart was big enough. They only sell the small tubes. I went ahead and got a big tube of GE Silicone 1. It's got this sort of unnerving last line on the instructions there that say not for aquarium use. After reading that in a small amount of panic because I'd already installed the first panel, I decided to do a little bit of looking around on the web, and it appears that it's perfectly safe, but it's probably not the most optimal silicone to use. Maybe for building aquariums, there are other things that work a little bit better. I'll include a link to a discussion I found about it on the internet. So while that comment thread is by no means like an official declaration of safety, it gives me a little bit more confidence that it's okay, especially for a small project like just attaching the background. So I went through and I siliconed the areas that are marked to silicone and the little stands, and I just slowly kind of put the background into place. I started from this side and I worked my way over here. And what I would do is I'd put it in there, I put the boards in to hold it, and then after all that I let it sit for 24 hours and then I worked on the next one. The very last one was under a little bit more pressure and I guess I didn't get it just right. So I ended up redoing the last panel. And I actually let that sit for about 48 hours before I messed with it. But now I've got everything down and it seems to be okay. I'm excited to move on to the next step. The other thing that's a little strange about this setup is I've got some gaps here next to the overflow. And I believe in some of their marketing materials and stuff, they said you could fill that in with some biological material, maybe some ceramic or something like that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. I probably will leave it empty for now and just see if I need to get back in there for something else. That'll be something I do a little bit of research as I go along. The main thing I want to make sure with this background, and my main concern with this background, is that Mr. Tubes can't get behind it. And I think I've caught all the bases covered. He could, in theory, flop over the top and maybe end up in the gap, but it goes right up to the top of the glass. So I'm hoping that that gap will be so thin that maybe I'll get lucky and he won't end up back there. Especially the bigger he gets. While he's smaller, it's a little bit more difficult to keep him out of things. But I think as he gets bigger and bigger, he won't be able to just kind of jump into the back of it. But you never know. They're kind of a wily species. So I might end up putting a net or something like that up there too. Something else they sent that I didn't use is this mesh. And I might end up putting some of this on, especially in the top parts or something like that. But for now, I just kind of left it out. They sent some instructions along with this too, but it didn't really explain what to do with this. My assumption is that anywhere I need to make a hole, I could kind of put this in to keep things from passing back and forth. So I might have the option of lining the very top of it with a couple of slices of this stuff. And I might be able to make like a little secondary shield to keep the fish out of there if I need to. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I don't have all my lights yet. I'm kind of improvising with the lights a little bit just to show you what this looks like. So this is probably not the most optimal lighting. That's going to change with time. And folks, that's all I got for you today. But next week we'll be installing the sump. That's right, we'll have the filter system set up for this. We'll be that much closer to being able to plant this tank and really get it done. So that's coming up real soon. Be sure to click that bell so you don't miss anything. I hope you guys are having a terrific December. And until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, try a new background. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.